Showtime. One last time around with Aaron Sokol. We're going to finish up talking about this particular part of public sector employment and how it's going to look over the next decade or two, the world of education. And Aaron, what we've got to turn to, because it's so much a part of everybody's talk and thinking about education, is this idea of privatization of education. Charter schools, private companies, building and creating schools and saying, oh, ours are really much better because we're in the market and we compete and we have to have really good schools. Is this going to eat up the entire public educational system, or is it going to create a two-tier where either you pay a lot of money for a good school or you go to a junky public school? What do you see happening in that realm?
So the first thing I should say is that a two-tier education system already exists in America.
Okay.
We already have a two-tier education system. And this is a very common argument that you're making, that the privatization and the charterization of the American public school system will create a two-tier system. But I would just like to start by saying that already exists. The two tiers are called affluent communities and urban communities. And if you have the money to live in a place like Orinda or Atherton, you have access to the top tier of the public school system. And if you live in a place like Oakland, like I do, you have access to the urban school system. Now, that does not mean there's not great options in the urban school system. But any kid who goes to school in Oakland and then visits a school in Atherton will tell you that their campus does not look the same.
Yeah.
Right? Their campuses do not look the same.
We know that.
Okay.
You grew up in Oakland.
So,
you know the difference.
So as long as that's clear. Okay. So the second point is that there are two major viewpoints on this issue right now. Now, the traditional viewpoint, or the public viewpoint, the more public sector oriented viewpoint, says that the public school system only works when everybody is invested in its success, when the entire country is paying into a single set of public schools, when all parents care about how successful those public schools are doing, and when parents work together to build a common public school system, exactly as we talked about, to get away from that tragedy of the commons and to rebuild a powerful statewide public education system. Now, the other perspective says, that sounds nice, but it's not so realistic. And that's not what's been happening for the last 20 years. So the other perspective says, basically, competition is good. It says that competition is good for the school system because it forces schools to concentrate on what parents want. Schools actually end up competing for students. Students carry resources with them. When a student shows up at a school, the state will allocate about $10,000 to that school here in California for that student services over the year. So if a student moves from a public school in Oakland to a charter school in Oakland, the public school system loses that $10,000 and the charter school system gains that $10,000. Now, the equation's not that clean.
Okay, but here's the real question is, what do you see happening over the next decade? I mean, is it an either-or? Is one going to get totally wiped out by the other? Are the two going to coexist? And then the other question is, what should happen, in your opinion?
So a lot of it depends on the political process, frankly. Right now, we have a very brief window when it's not easy for charter schools to operate in California, but it is possible. It is possible for charter schools to offer opportunities for students that may be based on new learning techniques. They may be serving communities that they feel have been underserved by public school options, or they may be creating a new school culture in an area where they feel students want access to different types of services. Now,
do you think one or the other is right, wrong, either? And I guess what we should do is we should spend 1 minute and just say, look, for those of you who don't know, the difference between a charter school and a public school, the public school is run by the public government officials, people who are part of the public school system governmental structure. Charter school is run by people who set it up as a private, if you will, non-profit corporation. So they're not directly employed by the government. They get the money from the government, from the tax base, but they operate the school independent of government control. So is one or the other better, worse, right or wrong? What do you think?
Here's the way I think about it. Schools are meant to serve students and parents. I think that the more choices there are, the better.
Okay.
I think our parents deserve access to as many choices as we can possibly give them. I don't think anybody talking about a private service would say, this private service is the best when there's only one option. I really don't think anybody would say that. People would say, this service will be the best when there's the most options. If you're looking for, say, the right university for your student to go to, or say you're looking for the right hospital, even if that hospital is publicly subsidized, as a customer, you want the most possible choices because that's going to allow you to find the service that's right for your needs. In the same way, I think that as a country and as a state, we should be offering the most possible different types of options to our parents so that different students can find the right schools for them. And part of that, to me, means opening charter schools to give students that option. Now, I should say right now, charter schools educate less than 3% of the students in California. So you're going to see a lot of stuff in the news about them, and they're a very visible part of the education reform movement right now. But when you look at the scale, they're still very small.
They just don't matter, really.
Well,
so if you're really...
I wouldn't say they don't matter. They do matter, but they matter for very few students.
Right, and if what you're really talking about is how do we better educate most of the students in the state of California, you have to be talking about public school systems. And there's no other way to talk about them than how do we get more resources into them? How do we increase the taxes that go to public schools? If you want good education, you have to pay for it.
Well, there's only two ways to get a better service. One is put more money into that service, and the other is be smarter with the money that you have. These are the only two ways to improve any service, frankly.
Yeah.
So with our public school system, we have two choices. Personally, I think we should do both. One of our choices is pay more money into public school systems. As a state, decide to increase the tax base or increase our public school system's access to resources. Secondly, we can be smarter with the money that we give to public school systems already.
What's that mean?
So,
and what I'm really asking is, there's a lot of criticism about the way that school systems are structured. Humongous administrations, lots of people downtown who sit in offices and kind of do nothing except shuffle paper, and then a small handful of teachers trying to carry the whole load, and parents trying to feed into that. Structurally, how do you see school systems looking, public school systems, over the next decade? If they go the way you would want them to go, would they be restructured?
One of the big impacts of the financial crisis has been that most public school districts, and these are the central offices that administer groups of public schools inside cities, have really, really, really gotten smaller. The central office at the Oakland Unified School District is about half as big as it was before the financial crisis.
Oh, okay.
So these districts have gotten much, much leaner. Now, that has not happened without pain to the school sites. Administrative procedures, professional development for teachers, additional centralized resources have all been cut back, which has placed a larger strain on the school sites. However, that said, school sites now have the ability to operate more rapidly and on a more lean basis in some situations, not always. Sometimes it can be very difficult for schools to get access to centralized resources they need due to these cuts. But that said, with a smaller overhead, with a smaller operating budget for school districts, that means a larger percentage of the money goes directly into classrooms, which is good in some ways for students. Now, it's not like we're giving teachers raises. So a critical part of this equation is more tax revenue coming back into the California school system, allowing us to rebuild the quality of public education.
And don't you ultimately, I mean, we're going to wrap this up now, but it seems to me that after all is said and done, the central focal point for whether a child gets a good education or not is the parent and the teacher. That's what it's all about. The parent is there or not there, as the case may be, different issue. But if you want a good teacher, you have to make teaching an attractive profession, right? Translation, there have to be good wages, good benefits, and good work conditions. Is that going to happen over the next decade? Do you see teachers' conditions improving, or do you say to people who are trying to figure out, where am I going, what am I going to do, what's this new economy, you say, oh man, stay the hell away from teaching, it's going to be the pits for years?
Honestly, I don't know.
Okay.
I honestly don't know. You know, there's two things in my opinion that have to happen. One is, exactly as you said, we have to pay teachers more. Absolutely have to. We have to pay them more, we have to give them better benefits, better retirement packages. Secondly, however, we need to elevate the status of teachers in our society. So we need to respect teachers the way that we used to in this country. Right. Teaching is a respectable, honorable profession that involves building on the promise of the American dream. And we need to respect and honor our teachers as the foundations of our society.
That's such a perfect place to close. That is the place to close. And we'll be back with more in your next lecture.